Was Murder, She Wrote wrong? Hi, I'm Sean Mullaney, financial planner. Let's discuss. So I'm a child of the 80s. And if you're like me, you probably loved shows like Murder, She Wrote. Angela Lansbury starred in the series for 12 years. Great television. There would be murder mysteries and usually 80s actors and big hairstyles and some overacting. One of the big 80s tropes was the will reading, right? So the patriarch dies, they're rich, they're loaded, and there's this dramatic scene where the will is read and somebody's disinherited and they do the overdramatic, I'm going to contest the will and all this stuff. And, you know, there's the will contest, there's the murder mystery, all these things. Great 80s television. But it turns out what was great 80s television may not be all that applicable these days. What do I mean? Well, think about where most Americans have their wealth. They have their wealth in two primary buckets. One bucket is retirement accounts and brokerage accounts. The second bucket is their primary residence. What governs those assets upon death? For those retirement assets, those taxable brokerage, all the financial assets, the thing that usually governs is called a beneficiary designation form, sometimes referred to as a payable on death form. These are vitally important. It's so important that every American has up-to-date beneficiary designation forms on file with the relevant institution. Your employer's 401k plan, your bank, your brokerage account, whatever it is, make sure you've got up-to-date beneficiary designation forms on file for all those financial accounts, and make sure they reflect all the life changes that happen. The births in your life, the deaths in your life, the getting married in your life, those sorts of things. Those should all be updated. You know, those events should prompt us to think about updating those beneficiary designation forms. And then real estate. Revocable living trusts are becoming more popular, and they're a great way to handle real estate. What we want to avoid, for the most part, not always, but usually, is something called probate. Probate is the process by which a will is validated by a court, and it can be expensive. What's a little cheaper and more convenient, particularly for loved ones, is placing real estate in something called a revocable living trust. These things are fully revocable during your lifetime, so if you don't like it for whatever reason, work with your lawyer, revoke it. But they help pass real estate outside of a will in a way that's much more efficient. And I also think, you got to work with a lawyer. Nobody wants to work with a lawyer, right? No, I'm just kidding. Lawyers are people too. But I would rather work with a lawyer on the front end when I'm alive and in control versus having the lawyer come in after death when there's been a tragic or upsetting event, and now we got to figure out the disposition of a house and we got to work with a court. I would rather do the planning on the front end where it's going to be a lot cheaper and I'm in control versus the court being in control. Okay, so if our financial accounts and our real estate are mostly disposed of outside the will, do we even need a will? And the answer is usually yes. You still need a will for a few reasons. One, if you've got minor children, guardians. Generally speaking, the will is how the guardian is designated. So you want to make sure that if you've got a minor child, you've got a will, a proper will executed to make sure the guardian is properly designated. But then also with property, there can be some property that doesn't fall into beneficiary designation forms and revocable trusts, sometimes like collectibles or personal effects. But then also wills serve a backup function, right? It could be that for whatever reason, a beneficiary designation form didn't get filed. It could be that a revocable living trust has a defect or some flaw in it, and all of a sudden the will now governs again. So it's good estate planning to have a will in place as a fail-safe, against any screw-ups or any problems with other arrangements. But that said, these days, if Murder, She Wrote was to be redone, I don't know if you could really get away with doing a will reading for most Americans. You'd probably have to do a beneficiary designation form reading. I'm Sean Mullaney. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.